Hello and welcome to Down to Earth with Terry Virch, where we talk about what matters down here on planet Earth. If you love the podcast, please don't forget to subscribe and give us a rating. And today I'm going to do another out of the ordinary podcast. I'm going to do a monologue about the war in Ukraine. Once again, this is obviously on all of our minds. It's incredibly important. And I had some thoughts of perspectives that I got from my time in space, and I just wanted to share those with everybody. So another monologue, and we'll get back to the normal podcasts with folks talking about space and filmmaking and other fun things. But today I really want to talk about this idea of disinformation. It is a very important thing. I think it's causing havoc in the West and democracies. It's certainly causing havoc in Russia. It's led to the enablement of this war in Ukraine. And so I've been thinking deeply about this. I've got some thoughts that I'm going to share. And it really comes down to how humans are hardwired to believe their tribe above everything else. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're talking about in America, if you're Texas or Texas A&M or Yankees or Dodgers or whatever your country, everybody has a tribe somehow, and it's really, really, really hard to come to the conclusion that your tribe is wrong or did something wrong. And in this case, that is what has led to this war in Ukraine. America is certainly not immune to disinformation. We are overwhelmed with it. It's the biggest problem we're facing. That's going to be the subject of other podcasts. Today, let's focus on what's happening on this war in Europe. And I was blessed to have this unique perspective, having been in space for over 7 months. I had a chance to fly there twice, look back, see the beautiful planet, and really understand how lucky I was to get this perspective. And I had a lot of time to reflect on what it was that I was seeing. And I think most people think that astronauts see the world as, when you look down, you don't see borders, and we should all sing Kumbaya and hold hands. And to a certain extent, that's true. I mean, you don't really see that many borders, but I could see conflict on Earth, and it kind of shook me. Actually, I have to tell a story about on my 5th night in space. I remember flying over the Middle East, and I could see Israel and Jordan and Lebanon and Egypt. They were all right next to each other. And I remember thinking, what's the problem, guys? You live right next to each other in just a small little area. And I remember going over South Asia, seeing this long 1,000-mile long river that was brown. At nighttime, you could see this brown river snaking through India. And it turns out it wasn't a river. It was the border between India and Pakistan. It's a military border. There's thousands of searchlights there. You can see that from space. And of course, the biggest thing you can see from space is North Korea, and that border between North and South Korea is striking. It is striking. You can see that same brown river, the demilitarized zone that I like to joke. I don't know who names these places. It's the most heavily militarized place on Earth. But the border between South Korea is this beautiful, lots of lights, thriving place, and North Korea is just a black hole. So you can really see politics and the difference between when we get our politics right and when we get our politics wrong, by looking down at the Earth at night. And my joke is what's important is not political, or is not rocket science. What's important is political science, because that's how human lives are improved or ruined down here on the planet. And I think the most profound thing that I saw during that time in space was in the winter of 2015, looking down and seeing bombs going off at nighttime in eastern Ukraine. There were these red flashes. I remember sitting there with my one of the Russian cosmonauts I was with, looking at this, and we were just silent. Like, what can you say? We're watching people die on Earth while we're up there seeing this beautiful planet. It was really tragic and sad. And unfortunately, now some of my colleagues are in the Duma in Russia, in their Congress, and they voted to attack Ukraine. I don't understand how that can be possible, but that's what's happened. And so the question I have now is that, and I want to talk about, is how can people be blinded to something that is obviously true, or something that's obviously a lie? Because the majority of people in Russia believe Putin's lies to at least some extent. A lot of my friends say, well, the war is bad. We should stop the war. But Why has Ukraine been committing genocide for 8 years? Where have you been for the last 8 years? Why does Ukraine want to join NATO and attack Russia? And all these things that are just not true. They're patently false. Again, Americans believe a lot of lies about a lot of things. We're going to talk about that a different day. Today, we need to focus on what's happening in Ukraine and in Russia. And one of the justifications, I think, for that, and I've been hearing this for the 20 years that I've been traveling to Russia and making lots of great Russian friends, is that, yeah, we have propaganda. Yeah, we know this is BS. We know this isn't true. But you guys have it too. And, how do we know that the West is not telling lies too? They're telling lies. And I will concede, our right-wing press cannot stop at any attempt to say something bad about Joe Biden. And our left-wing press will often distort facts and make articles lean left. There's no doubt about it. But you have to open your eyes and read these different news sources with the proper filter on. But if there's something that the BBC and CNN and New York Times and Washington Post and Fox News and DW News and Agence France Presse, whatever, if the entire world is reporting something, it's probably true. That's one way that you can tell if you're getting the truth or not. What the problems we have with right wing and left wing in the West is nothing like what's been happening for most of Putin's regime and the propaganda that they have in Russia. And he's concocted this story about Ukraine committing genocide and burning innocent Russians in the streets. And, I'm constantly told that, where have you been for the last 8 years when all these terrible things have happened? He's also saying that Ukraine is led by Nazis and fascists. In the West, when we hear those words, we think, huh, what are you talking about? Like, that was World War II. That was a long time ago. We've moved on from that. But in Russia, it's important to understand just how important those words are, just how important their victory was. Their Victory Day parade, annual parade in May is like the biggest event of the year. It's something that we don't understand just how powerful those words are. And when the president says we have to denazify, and when the president says there's fascists, that really has a guttural reaction with Russians that we just don't understand in the West. It doesn't make it true. When Putin says that Zelensky's a fascist, that's a lie, completely a lie. When he says that they need to denazify Ukraine, that's insane. It's completely ridiculous. But it has propaganda value. So if you're in Russia, you need to realize, okay, is this really true or is this not true? And the answer is it's not true. So that, that which brings us back to the power of propaganda. When you hear leaders saying things that are clearly meant just for an emotional response, you need to ask yourselves, really question, okay, is he really saying this or is it just propaganda? Here are some indicators. I came up with a list of a few things that might tell you that maybe this isn't true. Does the leader jail people for disagreeing with him? Does he make dissent illegal? Does he shut down access to social media and other news outlets? Does he kill journalists? If the answer is yes to those things, it's probably propaganda. It's probably not true. And you can't say, well, he's mostly right about some things, but the other guys lie too. Anybody who's doing those things is wrong. It can't be trusted and is a liar. Another technique you can use, look at motives. Does Ukraine really have a motive to attack Russia? Would a country that voluntarily gave up its nuclear weapons, and by the way, the UK, US, and Russia agreed to defend their territorial integrity back in 1994. So would a country that has a relatively weak army gave up their nuclear weapons, would they really go poke Russia in the eye, a much more powerful country? That doesn't make any sense. Would a country that has all these social and language and cultural and religious ties with Russia, would they really want to go attack that? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. And sadly, those cultural and religious and family connections are destroyed now. And Russia's on the wrong side of history for that one. But of course, the answer is no to these things. So, what are your motives? What are your, are you hiding free press? You can look at those two things. But let's look at Putin's motives. He said publicly, very publicly, on multiple occasions that the downfall of the Soviet Union was the biggest tragedy and worst event of the last century. Um, that tells you a lot. That if somebody thinks that the downfall of the Soviet Union is the biggest tragedy of the last century, the hair on the back of your neck should stand up. That's not a good thing. Does he think that it's Russia's right to tell Ukraine to demilitarize, to forbid them from joining NATO? He says that all the time, even though that goes against the basic premise of the United Nations, the basic premise of humans on Earth, that people have a right to what's called self-determination. A nation can decide its own course, and Ukraine has that right, and Putin's trying to take that away. Does Putin want to be seen in a historical context? Does he want to be seen as someone who brings back Russia greatness and respect? Of course he does. That's the theme of his presidency going back to the 90s. That's what he's been saying. Anytime a leader says they want to make their country great again, the hair should be standing up on the back of your neck. Leaders should be wanting to take their country forward, not moving them backwards. Unfortunately, that's exactly what Putin has done. He's taken Russia back many, many decades. And he's really cemented their place in history as a pariah state, unless they rise up and get rid of them, unless they rise up and change course, which is possible. The Ukrainians have done it. They got rid of a corrupt oligarch state. Lots of nations have done that. Now it's up to the Russian citizens to decide what they're going to do. So how do you process these things? I think the immediate guttural instinct of every Russian that I've ever known is to not trust the West, because we're trying to keep Russia down. We just want what's bad for Russia. We're just trying to keep them second rate or whatever. And I mean, I can say that's not true. I know that in the West, frankly, we don't really even care about what's happening in that part of the world. It just doesn't matter to us until you attack a European democracy. Then it starts to matter to us. Russia just frankly deserves a lot better than what Putin has given them. I think I looked today, if Russia were an American state, it would have the fourth or fifth biggest economy. It should be a global economic powerhouse, given all the resources, given the incredibly smart people, the hardworking people that they have. And a kleptocracy like Putin has just kept it down, and Russia deserves better than that. From my perspective, I had this amazing gift of getting to fly in space and look back at the planet. And I got a perspective that I never imagined. And people ask me all the time, how did that change you? And I think one way is I'm a lot less of a black and white guy. I can see, different shades of gray and things. Some things are right and wrong. Invading Ukraine is wrong. There's no shades of gray in what's happening right now in Eastern Europe. But about a lot of other things there are. And I think my perspective shift, I'm just realizing this recently because I've been thinking about this so much. It's much more, I've really opened my eyes to some really foundational beliefs that I had about politics, about religion, about my country, about family. Hopefully I can see them from an open mind, whereas most people don't have open minds when it comes to their country or their religion or their politics. I have changed a lot of my fundamental ways of thinking, trying to be, come at it from a big picture. When you see the planet, when I saw Earth, it was like, man, that planet's going to be there for billions of years. It's been there for billions of years. We need to not be so focused on ourselves. We're not really the most important thing in the universe. And it just allowed me to open my mind up. That's something that is just so hard to see your tribe with clarity, is not something that I had before. And I think I have it better now than I did before. And everybody needs to do that. Look at your tribe with clarity. Is this real? Is it not? Some things are right and wrong. Other things are shades of gray. But that ability to, no kidding, step back and think clearly about things is what we need to do. Because when we blindly follow our tribe and whatever they say, whatever the leader says, we end up with Ukraine. We end up with just all the calamities that humanity has comes from that. And the analogy that I've realized is true is a medical analogy that I'll use to illustrate this point. If you have cancer, you get a diagnosis of cancer, you're going to want to take care of it right away. You need to treat it. You need to get rid of it. You need to cut it out. If you don't, it will go badly in the long run. If you let cancer stick around, it's not a good thing for your body medically, obviously. And in 2008, the nation of Russia had a diagnosis of cancer when Putin decided to ignore the Russian constitution and keep himself in power. They had the diagnosis then. It's taken years for that to metastasize, but now they have a surveillance state. They have a state without any freedom of press or speech. They're a global pariah. Their economy has completely been shut off from the world. It's going to bring massive suffering to Russian people. And thousands of Russians are going to die in Ukraine. And more than that, Ukrainians are going to die in Ukraine because of this cancer, because they didn't remove it when it happened. Whenever you hear a leader saying, I'm the only one who can fix these problems, I need to stay in power for a long time, you need to run the other way. You need to realize you may be getting a diagnosis of cancer. They say power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's the situation that we have right now. And I'm afraid that the war in Ukraine is not going to end with this man in power. Either he stays in power and the war goes on forever, the Ukrainians are not going to stop fighting. There will be an insurgency for as long as the Russian army is occupying, or he's not in power and we can come to a better resolution quickly before it spirals out of control, because that's the real threat to the entire world. So I just hope and pray that my Russian friends can open their eyes to this truth. It's a terrible truth. It's one that needs to be addressed. It can't just go on forever, because like a letter from a lawyer, if you ignore it, it doesn't get better. You have to address it. Vladimir Putin is lying. He's self-serving. He's dragging his nation down for his own desires to be seen as this Putin the Great. And he's dragging the whole world down. He's hurting the global economy. And I hope that folks can open their eyes and see that. That's really the goal of this podcast, was to just talk that through. How do you deal with propaganda? How do you deal with disinformation? I hope that we can all open our eyes. Americans listening to this podcast, Europeans, Japanese, wherever you're from listening to it, really think through how you process news, political information, religious information, whatever, because we all need to do a better job of seeing the truth. So thank you for listening to Down to Earth with Terry Virts. Again, if you like it, subscribe, and we're going to get back to some cool astronomy and other topics soon, but this is one that has to be addressed now. Thank you.